Hey, I am Melody Owen, and this is Confessions of a Book Coach. I'm in the process of revising and publishing my book. It's my memoir called The Devil's Daughter, and this vlog is about my journey. So right now I'm working on a book proposal, and this is week 15. And I've been starting to read that large pile of books that I have in my reading list right now. I'm reading books that are similar to mine. So let's dig into what I did last week. Last week, I went to the library and I picked up all of those books. I picked up 6 books that are similar to mine. They're YA memoirs. And what I said I would do was I said I would look at one of them. And admittedly, last week I said I'd probably look at the easiest one to start. And that's what I did. I don't know if it's the easiest one, but it's one of the faster reads. I actually sat down and read it all at once and made some notes on it. So let's dive into that and see what I did. So the book is Hooked: When Addiction Hits Home. So Hooked has 10 mini stories based on anonymous interviews of people who grew up in homes where there was an addict, whether it was a parent or a sibling. And it's written by, and I want to get her name right. So it's not written by, I should say, the editor is Chloe Shantz-Hilkes. And she's a journalist and radio producer for the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, CBC, and Hooked was published by a Canadian publishing house. I'm still sorting out how I feel about the interviews being anonymous, the interviewees being anonymous. So I don't think that everyone should advocate for whatever they happen to be. So I was abused as a child. Doesn't mean that I should be forced into some advocate role. And so I understand their need or their choice to be anonymous. But at the same time, if you are going to be telling your stories, if you are going to put yourself out there, it can be a really good idea to do so not anonymously, but as who you are and being honest about that, so that we can remove the shame, so we can take away all that stigma, and so that people who, or in this case, youth who are moving through that right now can look at an adult and go, okay, they got a job, they went through university, they became a musician, they had a successful artist career, they went into the fashion world, they, had a family and raised a family, and they made it, they became somebody, right? That's something I want my readers to see. I am an ordinary, mostly happy adult who has done the work to move through my painful past. And that's something I want my book to show, that you can move through your painful past. Right, let's go into some of my notes about Hooked. So none of the entries in the book is a full story. They're more like anecdotes, and they're certainly written from an adult's perspective. They're not using the voice of youth. The book deals with different types of addictions, which I actually thought it was really great. That is something that it had going for it. And so each story touches on a different family, a different type of addiction, different problems that may arise from that. And with each story, there were insets that offered advice that touched on topics like dealing with emotions, accountability, taking responsibility, denial of the addiction, or self-esteem. I actually thought those were really, really useful. They're just little tidbits of advice, little tidbits of help, rather than, pounding down all this advice people were supposed to take. So I actually really like that part. The book itself, Hooked, is educational, and even offers a question and answer at the end of the book by a professor of social work. Now, some reviewers said that Q&A, along with the introduction, which was written by Robert Munsch, is actually the best part of the book. People loved hearing Robert Munsch's story. They loved hearing okay, he kind of looks like he has this perfect life from, if you know his books, if you either had children reading his books or you were a child when he was writing his books, he's still writing books. He's still alive. He's still doing that. He has over 50 books published. So, if he's someone you look up to and then you realize, wow, he's had to deal with this, that can be really useful. And the question and answer at the end, they also said that was really, really useful. So that's something that I could do for The Devil's Daughter, for my book, right? Who could write a foreword or an introduction? And so as I was reading the foreword and the introduction, I was thinking, like, who could do that for me? And I started a list. So that's good. In the back of the book, something else I noticed was they had like not a list of resources per se, but like a section on ideas to where to get help, both in Canada and the United States. I thought that was really valuable, and that's definitely something I could put in my book if in the end that seems to fit. So I read the book. Those are kind of my notes on the book. And I looked at reviews as well. Now, books have lots of reviews and lots of people say lots of things. So I'm going to look at three reviews and kind of touch on pieces of that made sense to me or that were repeated over and over again. So first I'm going to look at Kirkus Reviews. Kirkus Reviews did review this book. They didn't rate it, but they did review it. They liked it, and they overall, for the most part, they really liked the insets, the bits of information that I mentioned above. That was really good. Although they felt more context would have been useful. They felt that there were like 10 individual stories and there was like a Q&A, but there wasn't really that string, that thread that really pulled it all together. So that was something that they thought it lacked. Hooked did receive a good review from the School Library Journal. The librarian who reviewed that said, and I'm going to quote this. Well, she said that she thought the stories gave voice to the interviewees, and that readers, and I'm going to quote this bit, may find help in dealing with their own situations. And I agree with that. Hooked can definitely help people relate to other people and find ways or maybe solutions or ways through their own situation. I get that. Then I was reading the reviews on Goodreads. Goodreads certainly let me know what people liked and what people didn't like. This is really good for my own book as I'm revising it. I can figure out what people liked and what they didn't. So on Goodreads, the most common complaint was that the stories were delivered in like a cold, unemotional manner. And a lot of people really wanted like more like that tie-in, that emotional tie-in to the interviewees. It's hard when they're anonymous though, right? And if you have any experience with having an addict in the family, you'll know that emotions abound. So I think this will be really helpful for me as I go and review, as I revise my book, and I figure out like where to position it on the shelf, so to speak. So the whole point of this is to compare The Devil's Daughter with Hooked. And so both this book and my book aim at setting a path for youth dealing with family dysfunction. Hooked deals with specifically addiction and all the fallout from that. I mean, my book, my father's an addict, so yeah, same. Hooked is written from an adult perspective to youth. So it's like adults talking to youths, and it works to educate and give advice. I do not give advice in my memoir. Instead, my book allows a youth to come along that path with the character, with me. And from following me and my path and my values expressed in the book as a guide, they can find their own path. My book is written from the perspective of a youth, so it has the voice of a youth. And so they are living in the moment with that, and they can follow the growth of the character, again, me, thereby seeing a path of growth for themselves, or at least that's my hope. My book is a complete story, and it deals with the emotional side of being in a family dealing with addiction and abuse. So it's quite different from Hooked in that regard, because it's 10 kind of, as Goodreads reviewers said, unemotional stories. To mine, one long includes the emotional stories. So both books have their place. They're both good books, and they both have their place on the shelf, but they are both quite different as well. All right, that's what I did last week. What am I going to do this week coming up? I'm going to read Ordinary Hazards by Nikki Grimes. This is her memoir. It is written in free verse poetry, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. I Authors can really benefit from reading and writing poetry, and I hope to learn from Nikki Grimes. And I will let you know how that goes next Monday when I do my next live vlog. Until then, keep writing and have a happy week.